Okay, hello and welcome to the next in our series of career talk webinars from the WSET School London. This edition we are looking at marketing, branding and communication, and I'm very excited to have another awesome lineup of panelists to share their experience and wisdom with you. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions for the panelists, please feel free to ask at any point, but please do this in the Q&A section, where we will keep these questions till the end and go through them then. If you want to pop anything in the chat, if you want to just say hi, let us know how you're doing, please do. But yeah, I'll be keeping an eye on the chat, and if you have any questions, I'll just prompt you to put them in the Q&A. This is being recorded and will go on our YouTube and website afterwards, so if you miss anything or need to come back to anything, it will be available by the end of the week, probably. And that's it from me. Over to you, Lucy.
Thanks very much, Julia. Yes, my name is Lucy Stevenson. I work for WSET in the role of EMEA Regional Marketing Manager. So I look after the marketing for WSET across Europe, Middle East, Africa and India. So seeing quite a lot of people joining the chat from across that very broad region. So very warm welcome. I'm incredibly excited to be hosting this session this evening with three brilliant panelists. My own marketing career has kind of spanned a few of the areas that the panelists will be talking about tonight. So some events, communications and PR, and more recently more on the data-driven marketing side. So I've got a huge amount that I can learn from all three speakers here, and I'm sure our audience does too. So yeah, just to reiterate what Julia was saying in terms of this is a fantastic opportunity to ask some questions to our panelists, Tom, Nicky and Louise. Please do so. I've got a bunch of questions I want to ask them myself first, so we can leave your questions till towards the end. And hopefully we'll get everything that you feel that you need to know to explore a career in marketing, communications and branding answered, so you can start to get going. So yeah, without further ado, I'd love to just start off by asking our panelists to introduce themselves. So just to kind of give you a little bit of information about your background in marketing, communications and how you got to your current role as well. Could I start with Tom? You're in my top left.
Sure. Hello, I'm Tom from the top left. I run a company called Yes More Agency. It's a social media and content production company for drinks, brands, bars, restaurants and hospitality. We've been going for about 4 years, and before that I was working in other marketing agencies, from production companies and social media agencies like this one to above the line and through the line creative agencies also. And naturally gravitated towards food and drinks related brands and briefs and work because of a long-standing passion, having been a bartender before that.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Nicky.
Hi, everyone, I'm Nicky and I head up an agency called Phipps, and we are a broad communications agency, so we handle PR, social media and influencer campaigns and promotions, and also events, anything from a small event for journalists to an event for 12,000 people over a weekend for for a big drinks night. So all sorts of things that we do. How did I get into it? I guess it was kind of all a bit of an accident. I left uni and thought, oh, I know, I want to go skiing. I'd never skied before, so I went and did a ski season. And I came back and thought, God, what do I do now? It's, I've got the summer and I really don't know what to do. So I decided to move to London, and I got a job in event organising, party organising for an upmarket party planning company. Catering was always sort of my thing, and I did think at one point of starting my own sort of small catering business when I got back from doing my ski season, but I sort of lost the will to live with it a bit and moved to London. And then I got a job at a publishing company, again, organising big events for a publishing house. So it was Macmillan Publishing, which you probably heard of, and I did a lot of events for them. But I couldn't really see my career path. I couldn't see how that was going to unfold. And I always quite liked the idea of PR. To be honest, I wasn't quite sure what it was, but it seemed to be interesting. And I applied to the top 100 agencies in the UK, had some interviews, got a couple of job offers. One was from a freight forwarding PR agency who specialized in transport, and I wasn't so into that. And the other one was from Phipps, which was a food and drink PR company. And, from my background of sort of wanting to be a caterer, I thought, well, this is much more up my street. So I took the job as a junior, and then I never left. And I've ended up being the MD and the majority shareholder, and helping to grow the agency and bringing new clients and extending the team, etc. So I've been doing it for a very, very long time now, and seen a lot of changes.
Look forward to hearing about the team in a bit more detail in a moment. Louise, could I ask you to give yourself an introduction?
Yeah, I'm Louise, and I'm the founder of JJ Corrie Irish Whiskey, which is my brand that I founded about 5 years ago. But prior to that, I was kind of a career marketing and sort of commercial professional in big drinks companies. So I was born here on the west coast of Ireland, where I came back to found my business. And then in 1995, I left and went to college, and then I ended up in America working on this new thing called the internet that had just been invented. And I worked for an internet company, which was a very new thing at the time. And I was writing content for them. And then I ended up working for a PR company very briefly. And about 18 months out of college, I ended up working for Moet Hennessy, so the LVMH portfolio. And very specifically, I ended up in New York working on their champagne brands, Champagne Veuve Clicquot and Champagne Krug, and doing really kind of hands-on trade marketing stuff, really very, very executional, kind of hands-on. After a couple of years, MH moved me over to France. So I went from New York to Reims in Champagne, and I worked in the global marketing team. And then after a few years of that, I ended up at Pernod Ricard in London, where I worked on Stoli Vodka, which was a brand they almost bought before they ended up buying Absolute, relaunched that globally as a global marketing manager within the Pernod network. And then my last big corporate job then was at Diageo. So I ended up working at Diageo in the Reserve Brands group, which was at the time like the luxury portfolio within Diageo. And ended up working in Singapore for them and running these huge, vast global campaigns on a kind of a global scale, crazy budgets, mad kind of entrepreneurial sort of marketing stuff. So I quit that job after I was in the corporate industry for about 20 years because, and I'll tell everybody here, like it gets pretty soul destroying working for corporates after a time, like it really does. Unless you're kind of really willing to bed in and work it forever. And I decided I had enough. And then I started my own Irish whiskey business. And I kind of used everything I had learned in the previous 20 odd years to found my business, albeit with no budgets and no help. But we've launched an Irish whiskey brand globally. We're distributed all over the world now. The United States is our biggest market. And we're very much kind of on a pretty significant growth trajectory and are kind of punching above our weight for being a small Irish whiskey brand. So if there's any advice I can give anybody here today who's thinking about starting their own brand or making the move or anything to do with corporate life, I'm happy to answer any of those questions. But to summarize, I'm just a lifelong drinks industry head, and I've seen it change significantly. The marketing universe changed significantly from pre-internet to now. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. A really fascinating background there, and there are quite a few fans of JJ Corrie at WSET, so I've heard a lot about the brand, so that's very exciting. So what I wanted to kind of talk to you guys about now is you talked a little bit about your own roles, how you got there. There are so many different types of roles that people could get involved in across marketing, communications, branding. You could be into sort of the writing side of it. I want to talk about your organizations now. Could you give me a little overview of the different kind of marketing roles that you have within your team? Let's start with Louise this time.
Yeah, so we're a really tiny team. You know, we're still really small. Like we have distributors all over the world, obviously, and that's kind of our wider sales team. But the core team is really only like 6 people, believe it or not. And there's a role that everybody has because it's a tiny core team. Everybody is a brand ambassador, and every single person in the business, no matter what they do. You know, we have a hospitality manager, we have a production and logistics manager, and then we have an actual brand ambassador, and then a marketing manager. But all of them share a brand ambassadorial role. Like I don't view those roles as being independent anymore. Like if you're not a brand ambassador for your brand and you're not out there selling and telling the story and living it all the time, in a company my size, you have kind of no place, obviously. But the hard marketing skills then are, we have one person, Niamh, who's also a brand ambassador, but is very dedicated to social media. Because we have no budgets, we have no above the line advertising, social is everything for us in terms of how we tell our story and how we get it out there. That also involves content generation. So, you know, we have some great partners that we work with on the side of photography and filming, and we're constantly creating content. You know, it's like a churn all the time to show what's going on and to get information out there. So she's very focused on that piece of it. It's gotten a lot better organized as we've kind of gone on, but it's one of the most important kind of roles that we have in the business for something our size. Because at the end of the day, it's the most cost-effective way to get your messaging out there. Then on the other side, like, what I would call, we have another generalist sort of marketeer. There's no specialities with us massively because everybody has a hand in things. But we have a lot of new packaging development that we do, and then a lot of kind of extraneous sort of strategic marketing stuff that we work with different kind of agencies to do around. I would definitely categorize the 2 core marketing roles other than myself in the team as generalist. And that's very specifically because we're too small to have absolute specialisms. And I also feel in a business our size, you want to give somebody as much experience as they can to figure out, okay, where are your actual skill sets? And as we grow, maybe if you need to specialize a little bit, we can kind of put you into that place. I'm probably considered the director of marketing because but I do everything else as the founder as well, but I certainly have that hat. So I mess around a lot with the strategic pieces of it, but anybody in our business is capable of putting together, social media posts, generating some good content, talking strategically about the direction of the brand, running an event, elucidating on a kind of a look and feel. Like they're quite holistic marketeers, I would say.
Brilliant, thank you. And I guess because you are sort of founder and marketing director, a lot of the kind of content, do you feel that you are quite an important part of that brand and being out there on social, etc.?
For now, yeah. So we're very much we're a founder-led brand, and to differentiate yourself in the market. Like you can be a brand that has a backstory that you made up and that's cool and that's interesting and that's whiz bangy. If you have a lot of money, you can execute that really well and really fast. If you have 20 million euros as startup funding, you can do that. I don't have that. So I am very front and center right now of the brand. We're a founder-led brand. I'm out there. I'm a personality within the brand. But I am not the brand. The JJ Corrie brand and how it behaves operates very separately to me, but I have my own kind of founder brand as well that at the moment kind of lives side by side. Like the goal for this brand is that it lives forever and I die and the brand lives on. So I can't be the brand, but right now I'm a bit of a figurehead because being a founder-led brand actually is the very in thing to do. And Diageo can't do it. They can buy founder-led brands, but they can't do it themselves. So it's a competitive advantage that we've been pretty kind of strategic about as well. And it's just out of necessity. If I can put my face on Instagram for 20 minutes and 400 people tune in and I get a message out, great, because all it costs is my time. So certainly I'm at the moment front and center of as the founder-led brand, but if we play our cards right and grow, that will change.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, Nicky, could we go to you and talk about some of the roles in your team?
Yeah, it's really interesting listening to Louise and the team of 6, because what you described is possibly what I'm about to describe in a slightly different way, is that the team are the jack of all trades. You know, you said that everyone can do these like 5 really key things. And that, I think, is quite unusual for businesses. But if you think about an ad agency and how all that used to work, you would have, you know, your creative team, and then you'd have your copywriting team, you'd have your account handling team, and everybody did a very linear one thing. You were an account handler or a creative or a copywriter or a media buyer. Whereas in PR, traditionally, it's always been that you kind of do everything. So you come up with the idea, you plan the strategy, you execute the idea, you handle the client as you go along, and you do everything, and you're expected to be that all-rounder. Where I think that's changing slightly, and so in Phipps, everybody is an all-rounder, and when we're hiring people, that's what we look for. Where it is changing slightly, and where the roles are dividing a little bit, is that we do have people who are just social media and influencer marketing specialists. So they don't get involved in the PR side, but we expect everybody in PR to be able to handle and manage and run social media campaigns. So, but then we do have 3 specialists, and that's all they do. So the roles are slightly different. Where I think we deviate from Louise's business, because she's, you know, her business is a young brand, and we've been going for a longer time. And with PR and communications, there's a very, very clear career path, if you like. You know, you come in as the junior exec, and you don't really know what's going on, but you've been hired because you've shown, for me, it would be you've shown a real passion for food and drink. And it's something that really, really interests you. And it could be that you have your own blog, or you're an influencer, or, you know, a junior that I just hired during COVID, she'd set up her own small business helping local food and drink brands with marketing and social media during the pandemic. You know, that to me is an indication that that person is very passionate about what they do. So you come in as a junior, and then you become an account executive, and then a senior. So you work your way through the executive level roles. And I think that that's quite important, because it's always showing that you there's progress that can be made the whole way along. Then after that, you become a manager level, and you become a junior and an account manager, then a manager and a senior account manager, and so on. So again, there's progress going all along. And at manager level, you know, it's sort of, I won't go into the job description, but you are really the linchpin. I see that as such a key level, because you really are the linchpin of everything that clients need and that campaigns need. You are the person who is really making it happen day in, day out. Then when you've done that for a while and you're ready for the next promotion, you become an account director. And then when you've been doing that for a while, you become an associate director. So you might have account directors reporting into you and be more responsible for, you know, a higher level for more and more campaigns. And then you become a board director, and then, you know, then you become managing director. And we've seen people go from intern to associate directors without, you know, taking a breath. We also have people who leave. Some go in house. We had about 3 people who left and moved to New Zealand, and we had a little sort of posse of New Zealand people. And then we have people come back as well, who go away and then come back sometimes. So there are lots of different roles, different levels of seniority to join. And I guess we'll get into it a little bit later about what it is at different levels that, you know, we might be looking for.
Brilliant. And roughly how many people have you got in the team at the moment?
We're 15.
Yeah. Tom, if you could have the same question to you, if you could give us an idea of the roles in your company.
Yeah, sure. So YesMore has, we've got 10 people, and we're all the roles, similar to both Louise and Nicky, pretty multitasking, but then people will have their specific niche or their, you know, some people might have a particular skill that is stronger in one area, you know, than another, for example. So our entry level roles will tend to start with, if it's an internship, then the internship would go across everything and touch on every single function within the business over a 3-month period or potentially 6-month period. And that would always be a paid internship. And then from there, then that intern would then progress into becoming most likely a community manager or a junior social media manager. Slight differences between the two, in that a community manager might be somewhat glued to their phone and tweeting and Instagramming and managing the pages for our clients. So, you know, we've got clients like Aperol Spritz or Cambridge Distillery or Black Tower Wine, and a whole bunch others. But we've got community managers that will be posting all the comment responses. They'll be loading up the content, posting it, or scheduling it. They'll be drafting the copy in advance, often with a social media manager's input, and then monitoring and responding and engaging with influencers and so on. So we've got community managers that will engage via as Aperol Spritz UK, and they'll be chatting to Amanda Holden in DMs about, I don't know, some cocktails that she's, you know, Aperol Spritzes that she's had that week, or whatever. And then we'll be feeding that back to the PR agency that's been gifting those celebrities. And then a social media manager is slightly more senior than that. You would progress from a community manager into a social media manager, and that role is a bit more client facing, a bit more organizational, a bit more like a hybrid of an account manager. That linchpin, that central hub role that Nicky mentioned around account managers, I would have thought purely a terminology thing that we call them a social media manager, and I imagine Nicky's probably got social media managers as well. But very similar in terms of it's a hybrid role. You're managing the team beneath you, which is community managers, but you might also be briefing photographers, briefing videographers, in brainstorms, coming up with ideas for content, or looking into the data and the analysis and what images perform better or worse than others, putting that into a report, presenting that to clients, and so on. And then above a social media manager, they would normally report into an account director. That could be, we've got junior account directors and senior account directors. An account director is, whereas a social media manager might be more managerial and delivering on the day-to-day, an account director is more directing. They are thinking up the plan, the strategy, talking to the client at a more senior and strategic level, thinking a campaign or two ahead, and you know, like Nicky with your PR and comms experience, I'm sure Christmas is what, you know, those discussions started a long time ago for some clients, and some clients will start talking to you now, and some clients will talk to you in November about it. But the account director's job is to make sure that we're talking about things like Christmas or Dry January, or Valentine's campaign as soon as possible, and planning ahead for that. There's also a certain role for them in the fact that they're also trying to grow our remit with clients as well. So, you know, can we deliver more? Can we deliver better? Can we improve our quality, etc.? And then above that, we've got heads of roles, which we're growing. We've got sort of earmarked spots for them until we grow bigger. But the one that we've got at the moment is a head of client services, and she oversees everything. She's much more, she'll have a senior conversation with clients, and with myself and Dan as the two co-founders, but she'll also be responsible for a bit more organizational, operational side of things, resourcing, involved in interviews, making sure that our team are happy, and as a result performing, making sure that the laptops are working, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then Dan and I feed into that too. And then just a note on what Nicky, you mentioned about the traditional agency model, where you had art directors and copywriters as a creative team. That's kind of where Dan and I started. We left university and went into a traditional creative partnership like that, with him as the art director and me as the copywriter. And whilst we don't have those roles anymore, and in the agencies, most of the agencies that we worked for before, that we admire their organizational structure, we won't departmentalize like that. For us as a business, we prefer the model that Nicky shared, for example, and Louise, in the fact that everyone can do everything, but you might have your specialism. We have a leaning. So, for example, anything to do with the written word will tend to fall to me in terms of overseeing and approving or feeding back and directing the agency, you know, and how we speak. And whereas with Dan, he will oversee and direct the design and visual aesthetics.
Excellent. Thanks. So it sounds like there's like some really interesting different roles across the different teams. We're going to talk a little bit more about the kind of progression that a few of you kind of mentioned a few times as well later on. Before we get onto that, though, I want to talk about this sort of in its broader sense, the industry, this part of the industry that we work in, the marketing, communications and branding, particularly in the drinks industry. And for those on the call who are looking to explore careers in there, I want to explore some of the benefits and some of the challenges that are faced by people in this part of our industry. So let's start with some of the really positive things, the reasons why you go to work every day. What are they really exciting things about your part of this area, and what does a really good day look like? Can we go to Nicky for this one first, please?
So I think the great bits are about the job, you know, it's the sector and the industry that we work in. I think the industry is hugely collaborative, and it's filled with great people, and it's a lot of fun, and never ever underestimate those, you know, those aspects of the industry. You know, all those days ago when I could have gone into freight, would it have been as much fun? I'm guessing not. So I think that that's a really great thing. It's a great industry to be involved with. I think that for me, the fun part is seeing a campaign through from the start right to the end. And that could be like a month-long influencer campaign. But, you know, you've come up with the creative idea, you've come up with the brief for the agent, you've gone through the agent, the influencer said yes, you know, and then you put the whole the whole campaign together, right through to evaluation. So and feeding it back to the client. And I think the reason that I have never got bored with it over 20 years is that it's just a lot of fun seeing those things come live. You know, it could be an event, the biggest thing we do. 7 years, we did this huge event for wines from Rioja called Tapas Fantasticas. Some of you may have been, and it was quite the thing. And we'd have 12,000 people over a weekend in central London. And seeing that come to life, you know, it was 9 months to organise, but seeing that come to life is probably one of my biggest happy moments, really, in the job. And I think another thing I'd touch on as well is that, you know, making a difference. I think during COVID, the dials, the communications dials have changed from important to critical. You know, the marketing directors, let's say we report into a marketing director and what we do is important. But during COVID, I think that that's become critical. And we even had one client say to us just a couple of weeks ago, you know, the work that you've done has helped us increase our sales, which has kept people in jobs, you know, and that's different to before. You know, that would never have been the case before. So I think knowing that you're really making a difference and employing people as well, you know, that's a huge responsibility. And Louise and Tom both employ people, you know, and that's a massive thing. And you don't get that sense when you're working corporately, and Louise, I'm sure, will have a view on that. But, you know, when you work in a big corporate organization, you are an employee, and that's great. But when you are doing your own thing, you are an employer, and that's kind of everything. You know, you're responsible for somebody's career and their income, and that's a really big thing. And what does a day look like? I guess it's going to be the same answer from all of us. So I get in there first. But a day can be anything. No day is ever the same. I mean, it really isn't. We have tight deadlines, quick turnarounds. Clients who want a campaign to go live in a week's time, and it takes 3 weeks to plan, but you have to do it, so you do it. Somehow you manage it. So you could be on a video shoot for Instagram TV one day, or you do that in the morning, and then in the afternoon you could be calling in wines for a trade tasting. You could be negotiating a celebrity contract, which, as Tom will know, takes a lot of time. Quite often you could be writing a press release, you could be, organizing the production aspects of an event. So going back to the jack of all trades, you would be expected to be able to do all of those things, and they're all very, very different things. But no day is ever the same. Every day is an adventure, and that's what I love about it.
Brilliant. Louise, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think the good things are that it's fundamentally a fun industry, right? Just fundamentally, the industry is about making sure that people have a good time, right? So it's alcohol. If we just park no and low for a moment, even that kind of fits in with that. But it's about going out, having a good time, being social, sharing good times with friends, right? That's your job, is to kind of provide a message or provide an actual liquid that kind of does that. So particularly when you're younger, that's amazing because you have the best job of all your friends, right? And there was a time when you used to have an expense account, and if you were doing your job right, you'll know all the bartenders, all the best bars, you'll know the best nightclubs, you'll know where to go on a Tuesday at 2 a.m. and get free drinks. Like literally there's that real element of it that, like, if you're doing your job right, you have to know all those things because you're building a brand, right? So that's incredibly good fun in the early days. And then as you progress, and going out until 6 a.m. is less appealing to you because it does get less appealing after a while. The industry is very kind of work hard, play hard, and it's balanced a lot now in the last few years. People are a lot more mindful about maybe we shouldn't force people to go out until 6 and then be in the office at 9, and mental health has become a lot more important. So that's really good. But as you get older and you move away from that going out piece, you are forced to be really in tune with the zeitgeist of what is going on culturally. Okay,
I've lost Louise there briefly. See if she can come back soon.
Or whatever.
Oh, there you are. Sorry, Louise, we just lost you for a second there. Oh, I did.
Where did you lose me?
I think we were about 20 seconds or so, I think.
Ultimately, you'll stop going out, and as an adult, you don't want to go out as much anymore. But if you're in the drinks industry, you have to stay really aware of the zeitgeist and of trends. So every drinks brand has to remain relevant for the long term, and you have to be au fait with design trends and fashion trends and music trends and entertainment trends, no matter how old you get in the industry. So you always feel as if you're learning, you're being kind of culturally relevant, and that's part of your job. So that's really fun. The freight industry and the widget industry doesn't care who is number one today, or doesn't care about Skrillex or whatever. But you have to know, you have to be au fait with those kind of things. And I really appreciate that because it's an interesting part of the job. And then the third thing is that the opportunities that you get are bonkers. If you end up working for a multinational and you play your cards right, you can do the most insane things, like the festival you're talking about. I have memories, I rented a cruise ship once for a bunch of bartenders, an entire cruise ship, and sailed it around the Mediterranean on Diageo's dime. And we stopped at Barcelona and Ibiza and Monaco and a whole bunch of places. And it was a couple of $1 million or whatever it cost, but it was a big strategic kind of piece of work that was mad, right? But it was really, really good fun and massive learnings from that as well. So it's the funnest industry you can work in, hands down, other than maybe the entertainment industry, which is a par. And the people in it, you know, you forge bonds with people when you work in the drinks industry that you don't anywhere else, because it is a hard industry. You know, there's a really fun piece, but the route to that fun, there's a lot of PowerPoints and Excel spreadsheets, believe me, and a lot of convincing people that you need to do stuff. But once you get stuff away, it's really, really fun. And like, I have people that I started my career with in New York 20 years ago that I could pick up the phone to now, and we'll help each other out. You know, I'm working on a project today with people that I worked with in Diageo like 10 years ago that just picked up the phone to me, because you forge these connections and bonds in the industry that are unlike, I think, most other industries, because you go through the fire together. So I will never leave the industry. I briefly left it for 5 minutes and I came right back, because there's just nothing like it. Like, it's a great, great industry to be involved in, particularly on the marketing side, because that's where the fun is.
Absolutely. Yeah, sounding like there's some really exciting moments in your backgrounds that maybe we'll explore a little bit further later on. Tom, yourself for the same question, please.
Yeah, I would echo what you Nicky and Louise have said. That it's like we started this agency to be drinks focused, and it was for 3 core reasons really. Personal passion, because Dan, my co-founder, was brewing beer since he was 15 with a mash tun that he built from an old boiler that was ripped out of a house by his dad, who was an electrician, and he's still brewing on that horrible mash tun now. And I don't think it's terribly legal or safe for him to be doing so, but he's passionate about it. And then for me, working in pubs and bars and nightclubs, student nightclubs, mixology, and I just love that over-the-counter social aspect. And so it's kind of amalgamating what Nicky and Louise said, is that it is a sociable sector, and then to do the marketing of that, which is a sociable discipline in itself, is sort of, you magnify sociable. And so I think it's the industry for people that want to meet other people and to have those experiences with other people, whether that's their teammates or a photographer or a bartender or even your clients, or if you're the client, your agencies. There can be some really great fun to be had there, and we focused on drinks because we're passionate about it, and then because we're passionate about it, we'd naturally built up expertise in it as well. For me, it's on top of that a license to create, and so I've worked for enough brands like bleach brands and FMCG, just things that just don't excite me, like Nicky with freight. But and you can get excited about, I think, any drinks brand. Like, I don't think there's anything, like, even the ones with really, really awful branding and bad Instagrams, those are kind of the ones that excite me even more, because it's a bigger challenge, and it's like, right, great. Or the ones that come and say, we've got no budget, and it's like, brilliant, okay, like, we can come up with ideas for that. Like, it kind of is more exciting in my opinion. And the sort of benefits or pro points for me on top of that in the industry, on a sort of day-to-day level, I love to come up with ideas that resonate and relate to the audience, trying to come up with something that when you put it into slides, and there is a lot of slides and PowerPoints, and there is a lot of spreadsheets and data and analytics and so on that goes behind it. When you put that idea into slides and you present it, and you see the person that you're presenting to, your client, and they go, that's the one, that's the idea, and they get super excited about it. And then they go, after many back and forth conversations, right, here's the budget for it to go and make it happen. And then, like Nicky said, you then go and make it happen, and you see it from start right the way through to finish. And it might amalgamate in some huge content shoot or an event, or influencers creating content and posting on your behalf, and then you get the report back, or you do the report and you get the results back, and you see that it's managed to drive this much awareness or this many sales, and you're like, wow, we just made that much money for our client. Like, that's fantastic. And there is a bit of you that thinks, oh, I'd love to make it that for myself, but it's part of the team effort. Like, you have to make the money back so that you can justify the marketing in the first place, and it then comes back around and it becomes circular. So for me, it's the industry being a sociable space, and marketing being a sociable space, and then your ability to be able to create and see that through to fruition at the end.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's such an interesting industry in that it appeals certainly to people who have real creativity and want to be creating and want to be generating new ideas, but also to people more and more so that are results oriented as well. And you talk about spreadsheets, talk about reports and the data behind it. Certainly getting into marketing made me much more interested in those kind of results based elements of it, looking at the data and then seeing the reward coming back in for those as well.
There's an example of that, Lucy, where we had Carluccio's for a client for many years. And we were creating loads and loads of content for them, week in, week out, putting it onto their social feeds. And it was the same kind of content that our client really liked. And we quite liked it as well. But then we experimented with other types of content. And we found actually it was stop shooting top down, looking at the dish. Let's get right down into the nitty gritty of it. Let's drop drop that depth of field down. So we blur out that the background, make it look like a busy restaurant in the back. People wanted to see that food right up close. And then we also found analytics that came back and said the unhealthy dishes perform the best, and also then the vegan dishes, which are not necessarily healthy by virtue, but it was really interesting to see that data and to go through and go, well, now that's going back to the photography briefing, and we're going to change all of our photography now off the back of the data.
Absolutely. I think it's also really interesting if you're kind of into behavioral psychology as well, looking at the data and looking at things that maybe you wouldn't have ever really quite expected popping up, and kind of tweaking for that too. So some really exciting benefits there, and some very appealing elements of this part of the industry. To give everyone a fully rounded picture, if they're going to explore a career in your field, what would be some of the kind of regular challenges, headaches maybe, that people might be expected to face regularly, that they need to kind of get themselves prepared for if they're going to go down this route? Tom, actually, if we'll come back to you on this one.
So sometimes you come up with those ideas, you look at the data, you come up with those ideas, you put them into some slides. It's taken you a long time to do it, or you've done it very quickly in a short time, but it's taken you many hours in that short time. You might have to put in the late night or two, and then you present it and silence. It just doesn't resonate, or and either that your client just doesn't like it, they were thinking something in a different direction, or the idea that you presented is this budget and they've got that budget. That's a regular one. And you can then go, damn, I really like that idea. We really thought that was the one. And so that can be a bit disheartening. Sometimes I get a bit frustrated. So the majority of our work is in social media, and sometimes I can feel a bit like I'm putting all this effort in, the whole team put all this effort into a post that is gone by morning, like by the afternoon or something, and it's like, that tweet that took 17 emails to get signed off, or whatever it was, back to that celebrity or that influencer, and then it's forgotten about. Or I guess it's a bit like, that phrase today's fish and chip paper, or whatever it is, about newspaper and journalism. But so sometimes that can be a bit disheartening. Sometimes I feel like I want to put all that effort in and make a TV show that lives forever. But I think because you're constantly getting these new challenges every day, and if you're a natural problem solver, you'll be attracted to solving those problems regardless. So that's probably my two things.
Cool, thanks. Nicky? You're right.
There we go.
So
So a little bit like Tom, I think the hardest part of the job, not necessarily the most negative part of the job at all, but the hardest part is handling clients and managing expectations. And I think if you don't have you can learn how to do that. It's sort of you learn on the job. But if you don't have the stomach for having those difficult conversations sometimes, I think that can be really tough for people. So I think you do need to be, yes, we're very collaborative with our clients and we all have the same goals, but sometimes you have to know which battles to fight. And if you really feel strongly that your path is the right path, that you need to somehow get your client on that path with you. And that's a really difficult thing to do sometimes, and you can't always do it. So you need to be very open and up for a challenging discussion, I think, sometimes. And I use the word collaborative a lot because, we have some very, very long client relationships stretching back 20 years. Wines of Germany, we've been with them for 20 years. Wines of Rioja, I think, is 12 now. And lots of really long-term relationships. And I think one of the reasons, or two reasons why we have those, is because we're always challenging ourselves to come up with better and different ideas. But we're always challenging the client as well. And clients need that, but you've got to have the stomach for doing it, and not everyone does. And then another thing I would say is that we operate often on very short deadlines with huge expectations, and it can get quite stressful, and it can be sometimes the smallest thing, like the tweet that takes 17 emails and you've got a deadline and you've got to get it out. But it's, those small things can actually be incredibly stressful. So you need to be the type of person that can take a step back, take a deep breath, put everything back in its place, and then get straight back on it and deliver. So I think it's, it can be quite a tough environment. And that's an agency environment. That's not necessarily a drinks industry specific environment. That's an agency environment. So I think those are the two things for me is, managing clients' expectations, but being prepared to have those difficult conversations, and, coming up with solutions and dealing with the stress of it.
Yeah, that's great. So a lot of kind of parallels with what sort of Tom was saying, what Nicky's saying on the agency side. Louise, does that echo with you on the brand side and your experience on that side as well? Or are there different challenges there?
Yeah, I think there's similarities, I think. So in my current role, everything is fine because I have total control over everything, right? So let's just park that. I don't have to deal with people I don't want to deal with, and but that's because I have my own brand. But if we go back to the corporate world, like and if we just put the drinks lens on it. So I work for big corporations, and they're all very different in how they work. They're probably a bit more similar now than they were in the past. But the one thing that I love about the industry that perhaps I didn't mention earlier, but that's relevant, is that like every drinks brand that's halfway decent is kind of connected to a maker or something agricultural, right? Usually, even vodka is grown in a field somewhere in Tambov in the very beginning, and whiskey obviously is grown in a field. And before you get to the whiz-bang marketing stuff, you tend to have these very real, authentic people in small communities making this stuff. And that goes for mezcal and tequila and everything, right? No matter how big the brand is. And that's the bit that I always loved about the industry so much. And I always spent a lot of time going to the fields and meeting the people as to get under the skin of the brand, because I always thought that was very important. When you get to hard marketing roles in multinationals, you are extremely removed from that, and you are following a marketing tenet and a way of brand building. Everybody has their own way of brand building. Diageo have one, Pernod has one. They all have a particular thing that they go, this is how we build a brand, and they do that for a reason, because they have shareholders to make happy. So your role becomes not robotic, but like it can become very defined, because you have to operate in a specific sphere and in a specific way. And then what tends to happen in bigger companies as well is you never really get under the skin of the brand very often. You don't get the chance to do that, and you move on every 18 months to the next brand, the next brand, the next brand, because it doesn't matter what you're marketing, you know, you're following a formula kind of thing. And you see that in those big businesses. And I never experienced that because I just wasn't the type. Like, I always got stuck in and dug into a role for a long period of time. But you do see that happening. And sometimes there are people who don't give a dang about the man who makes who harvests the agave in a field in Mexico. You know, they are just following the way of brand building, because next week they're going on to moving to Amsterdam to work for a different brand. So those kind of people tend to then go off and work for Unilever and non-kind of drinks industry brands and stuff like that. And a lot of the big multinationals have gone that way a little bit. Like, there's a little bit of soul maybe that's been taken out of the global marketing role. But you can thwart that by going to work for a smaller brand for a period of time and finding your niche. But as these big companies have gotten bigger and the bottom line is the most important thing, no matter what anybody says, and the shareholder price is the more important thing, a bit of the soul has been taken out of marketing, a little bit, I think. And you're probably better off working at an agency rather than in the brand, because you probably get to do more creative stuff in an agency than in a brand. That's the only downside, really. Like, you can that I've seen. Like, it can be extremely hierarchical then in those big businesses. There's a huge amount of pressure. You know, they're big corporate beasts, and the deadlines are really tight, and you can drown in PowerPoints and Excel spreadsheets on occasion. Like, it just happens. So while I described the kind of glamorous side prior, like, the downside is that it's really hard, tough work as well, that can cause you a lot of stress sometimes, like any other job, you know, let's face it. But yeah, those would be the only downsides that I would see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's always going to be a challenge to balance the big wins, the easy wins, with particularly when you're working with, you know, big brands that have a lot of different stakeholders and also clients, is kind of making sure that you can actually get those wins done. That's really helpful. Thank you for giving some honest opinions about the challenges there. So hopefully people are still excited about a career in this part of the industry, and hopefully people maybe on this call have been looking at roles, whether they're already in the marketing sphere or looking to get into it. If you look on job sites at the moment, you can see that there is a huge demand, it seems, at the moment for marketing roles. And that's quite exciting, and some of those are more specialist roles, some of those are more generalist roles. If you were kind of going right back to the start and looking to get into this part of the industry at an entry level, what would be the key skills, the key training maybe you might want to undertake to get yourself in front of the right employers? Let's go for Tom on that one.
I think it's probably back to something Nicky said right at the beginning, talking about interns or junior execs. Passion. For an entry level role, it doesn't matter if you've got. For me personally, anyway. Other companies might be different. Don't care if you've got a degree. Don't care if you've got any formal education. One of the best members of my team is a former bartender who left college and worked as a bartender in London, and didn't get formal education, and then is excelling like in the company, because he knows how to talk to other human beings across a bar. And there's not much different in talking to other human beings across Instagram or social media or other social media, or talking to a client. And like Nicky mentioned, managing those difficult client situations, or managing expectations, for example. The client is the customer over the bar, right? It's you know, I thought that my drink was going to be like that, but it was like this, you know. So there's lots of parallels there. So for entry level, for me, it's passion and enthusiasm. is not a prerequisite for someone to have done a lot of work or a lot of homework in advance before applying for a role. But you can see when a cover letter or an email is copied and pasted and just fired off to a load of people. And with the application, like me as a co-founder of an independent company, maybe similar to actually both Nicky and Louise, we're just really, really busy juggling 1,000 things all at once. And for a CV to be sent with the same cover note that doesn't really express any personality or enthusiasm for this role with us specifically, that it just doesn't stand out, unfortunately. So for me, entry-level position, passion and enthusiasm, and there's certain things like don't be afraid to ask questions. No, there is no stupid question, just ask it, but probably don't ask it 5 times and you know and still be asking the same question, you know, like learn from the answer, and show the enthusiasm and initiative on certain things, and just a passion to learn and to improve and to evolve. That's my personal opinion for an entry-level role.
And to add to that, Nicky, you touched on it before, as Tom mentioned.
Sorry, I might have hogged your answer
Yeah.
there, Nicky.
No, a couple of things really. I always say that I look for people who've got a degree, and I often end up employing people who don't. So, yeah, so that makes no sense. So, but what I like about people who've got a degree is that it's shown that you've committed yourself to doing something for 3 to 4 years that motivates you and that you believe in. So that's why I quite like degrees. But then I, hired 2 senior people who had, left school. One had left school at 16, got straight into the industry, and she became an associate director. So, it's not necessary, but it's quite a good thing to have.
I think that's a good
marketing
point.
degree
That's
or
a good point,
PR
Nicky.
degree.
I was just going to say, like, it is a good point, because as long as someone demonstrates that they can commit themselves to something, I completely agree.
Yeah, and then people say also, what degree do I need? That's often a question you hear, and it doesn't really matter, to be honest. You can get PR degrees, you can get marketing degrees, you can get a social media degree these days, but or you could do history, or you could do psychology, but it really doesn't matter. It's just that you've done something for a period of time, which shows commitment and a certain amount of brain power. I always look for languages, because we have clients, particularly I look for Spanish, French and German, because we have clients in all of those countries. And whilst all the meetings are in English, actually you just get a little bit more out of it if you do have language speakers on your team. And then another thing which people I think always find slightly strange is I look for people who've done waitressing or worked in a pub. So I look for hospitality experience as well, whether that was through uni or when people left uni, or if it's their first job. And I really ask a lot of questions around that in an interview. And I can see people going, why is she interested in this? I've got a first in psychology from Cambridge. Seriously, am I talking about my waitressing? But I actually think if you can do good front of house in any role, you can succeed in communications. And it's exactly what Tom just said. If you know how to talk to people, and hospitality jobs, you have to be able to do 5 things or 6 things, probably more, all at once, without letting anything drop. And that is kind of what our job is, and if you're good at that, then I kind of think you can pretty much do anything, certainly in a comms role. So I do definitely look for that. And then the other big thing is attitude. We talked about passion and interest earlier. But yes, you need to be a self-starter, but I'm looking for somebody who will bring solutions to problems. We have problems every day, there are issues every day, not big ones, small ones mainly, but you really need somebody on your team who can do that. And are they people orientated, not just for the client, but what are they going to get on with the rest of the team? Can they present well? Do you believe them? Are they credible when they're on interview? And then ultimately, it come a crisis, big or small, do I want them on my team? You know, if I was in a lifeboat and I could pick 10 people, are they one of those 10 people that I'd want on my lifeboat that's going to help us survive? You know, and that's what I'm really looking for in somebody. And you know, all of that isn't on a CV, if I'm honest. A bit of experience would be great, and if they, you know, if they've got a WSET qualification, that's great, but that just shows me that they're interested and passionate, you know. So all the stuff that I'm kind of looking for isn't really on a CV. It's sort of the nuts and bolts of the person, their attitude, and you know, what inspires and motivates them.
Great. Yeah, and in terms of having product knowledge, do you see that as something that becomes more important as someone progresses through the organization, or is it again just about showing commitment to the industry? And do they really need to have that?
As a junior, we you know, we stick them on the WSET courses, and you can learn about the industry, but it's not just about the product. You know, as you get more senior, it's about the contacts, about who you know, it's about your network. As a senior person, yes, that is quite helpful to have the product knowledge and the network. Not 100% necessary, because we've got a lot of that already throughout the agency. If you're bringing another skill to the agency that we don't have, then we'd overlook that, because you know, they would then potentially be doing a slightly different role within the agency. But we've got plenty of people who know everyone and you know, and who know the products and who've got their diplomas and all of that. We've got that in spades. So you know, maybe it's that we're looking for something different. But it's helpful. Yeah.
Great. Louise, in terms of kind of going back to that question about getting into the industry and what you would be looking for new hires.
Yeah, so from the context of being sort of a, you know, a startup brand or a founder-led brand, I'm similar to Nicky. Like one of the main things I look for is, have you been a waitress? Have you been a bartender? Like, honestly, and if you have, your CV will probably make it through. I don't really care what your degree is. I don't really care if you have a degree. It's kind of irrelevant. Any prior interest shown in the industry, and it doesn't have to be my category whiskey, but like a qualification, even a level 1 or whatever it is, or a weekend course or whatever taken from you guys goes a long way with me. Because for me, that product knowledge piece is very important, or that category knowledge piece is very, very important. And then that just shows that, okay, this person in their spare time has gone ahead and done this. Like that's kind of really important for me. And then I kind of echo what everybody else says. A lot of it then is soft skills. You know, do you have the kind of personality that can deal with people all the time? You know, we have to go to whiskey shows for 72 hours straight and deal with people all day long and say the same thing over and over again. Can you do that? It's tiring. And can you keep smiling? Like, it's a soft skill and it's a personality trait. And are you willing to just do lots of different things and be flexible around that and solve problems as well? So, you know, it's going back to the idea that the drinks industry is a sociable industry. The hours are long. You know, they might be sociable hours sometimes, but it's not a 9-to-5 industry. I want to know if you want a career, not just a job. You know, are you going to go on somewhere else and do really good things within the industry sort of as a whole? So that's kind of very soft skills stuff. But I do go back to, have you worked in hospitality? Yes or no, because I do believe as well that if you can do that, it's awful half the time, you know, and if you can do that, you can kind of put up with a lot, and you can probably do this job as well. I think for corporates and stuff like that, from my experience, they very often want you to have a marketing degree, and they can be a lot more prescriptive around that sometimes, but you can circumvent that by having an entry-level role at a non-corporate brand, you know, like mine, for example. You can be a brand ambassador with me for a couple of years, and then probably go on and work for Pernod or Diageo or somebody big or whoever, probably get in there at some point. If you're interested in doing kind of the corporate thing, the corporate guys tend to be on an entry level, tend to be a bit more prescriptive, unless again, there's specialist roles and you've been a really, really good bartender for an extended period of time, then there's a route into corporate like that. And that can very often translate into a marketing role kind of later on. Like we hired loads of bartenders in my day, back in the day. So yeah, there's routes in. If you're really interested in getting involved, like go and talk to kind of a smaller brand at an entry level. If you are good at social media, I can't stress this enough, like there is a whole generation of people kind of my age, like that have started brands that fundamentally don't understand, they don't live social media as much as you guys do, you know, entry level people do. So if you can wax lyrical about TikTok and wax lyrical about Instagram engagement, 9 times out of 10 you'll impress somebody who started a brand, because they're busy raising money and doing all sorts of stuff. So putting that to the forefront of your CV is important. And then to echo what Tom said, like you need to know about the brand you're applying for. Why do you think JJ Corrie is interesting, or why do you think brand X is interesting? You need to have a connection, or showcase some kind of a connection, because at a brand my size, you're looking through qualifications and into, you know, what the motivations of the person are, I would say.
There's probably something to add on to that, Louise. Like I find, because you're busy and you sort of don't see all the applications all the time, when someone applies but then also connects on LinkedIn and then comments on our posts and engages and becomes part of our community and our debate, we might not be hiring for that role for 3 months, but then when we are, they're in our minds already. And so I think it's part of that, like it doesn't have to be just the cover note that says, oh, I'm interested in your agency or your brand because of these reasons. It can be just demonstrate the interest.
Yeah, because it's exciting as an employer to get a CV from someone, or to look through an application from someone who seems to genuinely, they're spending their time, not just churning out CVs and churning out the cover letters, but they're spending their free time looking around your brand, as Louise said as well, and potentially doing some product knowledge training on the side as well. It's exciting to know that someone like that who's got that diligence can be part of your team, and that's really helpful. I notice we're getting a little bit closer. I've seen some good questions coming through from the audience. I want to leave a little bit of time for those questions too. So I just got 1 or 2 more for myself before we go to those. I guess one of the things I wanted to ask from you guys was, this is a part of the industry that moves incredibly fast. We have things changing all the time. As Louise was talking about, you have to be incredibly tuned into the zeitgeist, but also when you're in the kind of digital marketing sphere, there's something changes all the time. You have to always know what's changed in Facebook's algorithms or Google's, whatever it might be. How would you suggest that someone could, for a limited budget, so hopefully some free or inexpensive resources, how would someone keep themselves up to date? How do you keep yourself up to date? Tom, do you want to take that one?
I subscribe to certain newsletters for publications, and I'm a bit guilty of skim reading a lot of the headlines. I'll skim read a lot of those newsletters with the latest news and stuff, and then dive in deeper onto the more interesting ones. Our team internally, we use Slack for our internal comms, and for anyone that's familiar with Slack, it's they could describe it as, like Skype or modern day MSN Messenger or something, but we have a channel in there called articles, and that is just for sharing interesting things from the web, and we're always reading and immersed in that area. We've also got one of the team leads on helping us as an agency get our own press coverage, and so she's reading the papers, the publications daily as well, and so we've got lots of eyes on these things. The other thing is that our clients want us to be at the forefront of the latest trend or the latest thing that's going off, and so we just have to be in that zone. So community managers, those roles that I mentioned right towards the beginning, community managers are living and breathing that brand, and they are immersed in it. They are speaking as the brand, and they're speaking to the influencers, and they're speaking to the audience all the time. And so they're often at the forefront of seeing what the latest trend is and what's going on. whether that is a change in the algorithm or whether it's the latest trend on TikTok. They're there, and they'll be feeding that then back into the company. So I tend to be reading the sort of more strategic level things, how the industry is shifting and things like that, and the so-called rum boom and things like that. But they're more like on the ground from the audience feeding in.
Great. Either Nicky or Louise on this one, anything to add to that? Any extra resources you'd recommend?
Yeah, I mean, like Tom, I personally don't read all those things, but I have a team that do. My social team certainly would be reading all the trend stuff. Every Monday morning, we have an editorial style meeting where we read all the newspapers. We report back on any food and drink trends in the national media. We read all the food and drink press, and again, we've looking at all the trends there. And the marketing media, I think, is a really good place to start. Brand Republic, I think, is quite a good resource. And then there's an agency as well who we tend to look at all their insights, called We Are Social. Tom probably knows that. He's laughing his head off. He's probably doing the same as me.
I used to work there, and I also read their blog.
There you go.
Most weeks, the Monday Mashup.
Yeah, so that I find them actually a really useful source of information when it comes to trends, etc., and keeping up to date.
Same for me. Like I read a lot of industry blogs, like not blogs, but roundups, like hard alcohol industry sort of roundups, like big level strategic stuff. And then I'm active across all the various different social media channels personally as well, so I get a bit of an insight as to what's going on. But one of our team members who does most of the heavy lifting on social media as well is effectively a community manager, as you're describing there, Tom, and she's at the forefront of that. So she'll alert us and say, "Oh, the algorithm has changed. We have to do a video with a face on it as our first story every day." Blah 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 blah, that kind of thing. So I think, though, that's a really important part of anybody's marketing career, is that you really have to be on top of, you have to read, like you need to start your morning commute or your morning really every morning with a bit of a read of whether it's the food and drink press or roundups or whatever. That kind of has to become part of your daily routine, because you need that kind of vertical knowledge really to be fully informed. It's always been like that. When there used to be a time when you just wake up in the morning and you'd all read a newspaper, or you'd read the weekly drinks publication X, whatever it was. Like, that's just an important part of being a marketeer or a communications person in the industry.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that attracts me to the industry as well, because in the same way that it attracted me to the drinks industry in the first place, is you never stop learning. There's always something new. There's always some new trend. There's always some new grape variety when it comes to wine, all that kind of stuff. So people who constantly want to be learning can get a lot out of marketing roles for sure. So I'd love to turn our attention to some of the questions that have been coming in on the Q&A. So we've had a couple that relate to, we talked a little bit about how you might get started at an entry-level position. If you were moving from maybe a more senior role, and someone was asking specifically about sales, how would someone, do you think, when they're job hunting, move from a sales role into a marketing role at a more senior level than what we've spoken about so far? Throw that out to whoever wants to take that one.
I'll start. Like, I've done that. Like, so I went from marketing to commercial and kind of back, but I had to, I changed companies to do that, quite frankly, in the big kind of corporate world. Like, and then I spent the beginning of my career doing hardcore marketing and comms, and then I went into a commercial role. And then that company, they were like, "You're no good at marketing, you have to stay in commercial." Like, it was impossible to kind of get out of it. So I'm not saying change businesses, but like you just have to kind of find the right fit for you. You might very well have to kind of change over, but they're very much transferable skills. Like, if you have it, and very often some businesses really appreciate people with commercial heads on them going into marketing, particularly on the executional side of it. So if you're working in a global brand team, they couldn't give a damn if you know about sales. But if you're working in a national team like Pernod Ricard UK, for example, you need to know that your job is kind of 50% marketing, 50% commercials anyway. So they're much more interchangeable. So it's just about kind of finding the right role really that would appreciate both of those things. They do exist, and it's absolutely transferable. You just might have to be a bit strategic about where you go and how you position yourself.
Anything to add to that, Tom or Nicky?
Yeah, one thing I'd say about sales is that often agencies aren't very good salespeople. You know, we're selling all the time. We're selling ideas to our clients, and we're selling ourselves to win new business and to win new clients. And often what you'll find is that agencies aren't always the best salespeople. So someone who's a good salesperson could come in, you know, in that role, the right salesperson, either to help the business grow or to, you know, help sell things to clients. You know, maybe that could be a whole specialist role within an agency. I think that the more senior you are, the harder it is sometimes to change roles. Sometimes we've taken on people who are more senior and they've kind of dropped a level to come in on the comms side. And then they work their way back up, but they've taken, you know, a year maybe on a reduced salary to make that change in career, and that's not uncommon. But again, that depends on your situation. You know, if you're, you know, supporting a family, that might not be possible. But if you're younger and living on your own, then that might be an option. So we certainly have done that. But I think a lot of skills are transferable. I think the bit that often isn't, and this is often if people are applying for a role from overseas, is your network. And your network, as you become more senior, your network is a really key reason why people will hire you, and you won't have that. And so that can be, I think, a bit of a gap.
Tom, anything to add before we move to the next question?
I'd echo what these guys have said. I was working in marketing agencies, and I knew that I wanted to go and start up my own agency at some point. And so I navigated towards the position of new business director in agencies, and so went and worked, but basically doing sales for the agency. So similar to what Nicky's saying, you get into a sales role, because I wanted to go from marketing to learn more about sales, because I knew that sometime in the distance I'd start up my own agency. Did 4 years on new business, lead generation to grow new clients. And then I went to a company that does new business for agencies. They're a lead generation agency, and spent a year or so there doing the same kind of thing. And that's where I realized, like Louisa said, marketing people want to know more about sales, and salespeople want to know about more about marketing. And actually, the more you can start to speak the same language, and to, you know, like we pitched a fantastic campaign to Ridgeview Sparkling Wine, which drove their greatest volume in Waitrose ever, and increased their online sales on their direct website by 350%. And it's by understanding the connection between marketing to attract a consumer and to create brand love, and then retargeting those through certain tools like paid media, retargeting, and so on, to then drive the sales either direct to your website or via a retailer. And so when you can start to connect those dots, I think that's actually, I think the person that said that sales question is like, that's kind of an exciting thing, I think, to go to marketing agencies or brands with marketing departments.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those lines between traditional marketing, traditional sales roles they're increasingly blurred. I think marketing tools are sales tools to a certain extent as well. There's different skill sets potentially in people who've kind of come from a sales background or a marketing background, but I think they have a lot in common and a lot of crossover. That's great. Thank you very much. I have a question from Oscar, which is for Louise specifically. Starting a smaller company, often with a smaller budget, as you were mentioning right back at the beginning, within the drinks industry, is social media the real major focus when it comes to marketing? And how much do the other channels play a role in the growth in sales these days?
Yeah, social media is number one in terms of channels of marketing, but there's two other key areas as well. One is social media gets your message out to consumers and arguably trade as well. But then the real world kind of enthusiast audience that, you know, for a whiskey brand, for example, whiskey inspires real kind of cult-like followings, and people get into whiskey and that's their hobby. Like, that's what they do. That's how they socialize. That's what they talk about. That's what they blog about. Like, they're really into it. So there's a group of like whiskey files, if you like, that we focused a lot on in the very early days and continue to focus on and building relationships with. And they come in the form of whiskey clubs and whiskey clubs in real life and whiskey clubs on Facebook and sectors of Twitter and places like that. So niche kind of they're old school influencers, like, you know, in that they're kind of, if they say your whiskey is good, they actually know what they're talking about and people will kind of listen. So that group of people is very, very important. And bartender and trade advocacy remains as important as it was 100 years ago, right? So having that target audience and getting your brand out to real human being bartenders and arguably as well buyers at places like, you know, Master of Malt or Waitrose or Whiskey Exchange, like the real kind of decision makers in the trade is possibly the most important thing, because you'll actually sell off the back of that. Because if you have the best social media in the world and you can't get your product anywhere, what is the point? So those kind of three places are how we began building the brand. Like, we built trade advocacy, we focused on the whiskey consumer, and it's only now we're starting to communicate and think about people who aren't whiskey heads, you know, whiskey geeks. Like, we're now thinking like, okay, maybe Mary, who's 28, who has this kind of a job, might like us as well. Let's try to appeal to her. So and social media does that role very well. But for a brand like ours, social media has been the making of us, and our approach to it has just been really kind of transparent and engaging. So it's worked very well for us.
Brilliant, thank you. So Liam's asked a question. Again, sorry, this is sort of focused towards Louise. So speaking to your point about the producer being at the heart of a drinks brand ethos, does the history and heritage of brands and drinks categories sometimes clash with innovation and trends? For example, pink gin, flavoured whiskey, spiced rum, and how do you address that and ensure a brand's heritage is maintained while appealing to the TikTok crowd?
Yeah, I think these two guys could probably answer this very well as well. Like, yes, sometimes it goes really badly wrong. And that kind of goes to my point earlier, is that sometimes you're in a marketing organization that is so far removed from the roots of the brand that they're bringing in Skrillex to do like a massive promotion, when they possibly should be talking about the guy who grows the botanicals or something. Like, it's actually fundamentally more interesting. So yeah, there's loads of examples of that going really badly wrong. And that's a symptom of that disconnect between the product, which is, like, I always go back to it, it's fundamentally an agricultural product made by communities. Like, that's most booze brands or alcohol brands worth their salt are kind of like that. So yeah, it's a problem in the industry. You'll see it all the time. I'll hand over to you two, because I'm sure you have an opinion on that as well.
Anything for you guys to
Yeah,
add?
I can answer that. Yeah, I think for me, it's about, it doesn't necessarily matter to me if it's about the story and the heritage and provenance of a brand. It's about what is going to relate to the audience and telling that story. So you've got, you know, typically say a Scotch whiskey brand, they'll tell a particular story, or a rosé brand, for example, from France will tell a particular story, but that's very different to Babe wine, that's a rosé in a can created by social media influencers, and they're still storytelling, but it's about what's going to relate to their target consumer. So their consumer is interested in this little niche, whereas a different consumer is interested in the, might be interested in the terroir and the pH level of the soils. So yeah, I think it's about picking out what is of relevance and resonance to your audience, and that probably starts with research, insights, and strategy around your audience segments in the first place, to work out what will appeal to them, and making sure your brand is appealing to them, and then your marketing is appealing to them.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think in a way it's kind of the wrong question. You have to put your audience, your target audience, at the heart, and then work out what your messages are and what is the best way of translating those messages to your audience. And I would suggest that TikTok is rarely the answer, but that's just a personal thing. If you have a brand which is all about history and heritage, you're probably leaning one way towards your which type of consumer you're after, and that's probably not the TikTok audience. But if you have a really cool kind of funky vermouth or whatever, then TikTok, that might be something for you. But never start your plan with the channels. Always start it with your audience and your messages, and the channels will then come.
Absolutely. Fantastic, thank you. We've got a few more questions in, but I'm afraid we are running out of time, so I'm really sorry if we didn't manage to get to your question. Please feel free to drop us a note at WSET School London if you would like us to ask anything specifically to the panelists, and hopefully we'll get to it. I wanted just to do a quick roundup, to just have a very quick question about the future and what you're optimistic about, what you're excited about for yourselves and for your organisations before we finish up today. Let's go to Nicky on that one first.
Yeah, sort of several things excite me at the moment. One is that food and drink, I think, is a pretty robust category. And we do both at our agency, but drink is probably mainly what we do. People, they're still drinking. There's been a pandemic, they're still drinking. As an agency, we've grown, we've won new clients. We started the pandemic as 12, we're now 15 people. And I think that the fact that it is a robust category, and I know hospitality has fallen off a cliff, but if we're looking at brands in retail, it's a very robust category. So I think that we're in a good space. I'm excited about the challenges, and this isn't necessarily a drinks industry challenge. It's an agency and a how we work in the future kind of a challenge. I'm interested in how we are going to carry on working. I think it's a big challenge for all businesses at the moment. We're doing 1 day a week in the office, and we're kind of quite liking that, and business is going really well. Do we need to be in the office all the time? So I think that's sort of looking forward to how we crack that challenge. But one thing I would say, and this is kind of COVID related, is that we have, as an agency, we have two challenges, and in essence they haven't really changed at all. They've sort of grown bigger in a way, and they're harder to crack. But the two challenges are delivering campaigns for your clients and keeping your team motivated and engaged. And if you can do those two things during COVID, then I think the future is looking quite an exciting space.
Thank you. Louise, same question to you.
Yeah, so we're at a period of growth in the business now that we're kind of moving from startup to scale up, and we just signed a big distribution deal in the US nationally. So we're starting to kind of expand the brand kind of across the US, and we're moving into that place, as I was saying earlier, from a marketing perspective of going outside of the core whiskey consumer and going into being a bit more consumer facing, and expressing the brand in ways that are not just exclusively kind of liquid credential focused. Like that's a part of it, but making the brand relevant to you and your lifestyle rather than just the brand components. So that's quite interesting and a big challenge. So we're moving into that space. But then at the same time, at the core of what we do and what I like to do is that we have some really interesting stuff going on the production side. Like we've just forged a partnership with a cooperage in Jerez in Spain and Montilla, and we have all these new bodegas that we're working with to create some whiskies. We have an exciting collaboration going on in the US with a bourbon and in India and all sorts. So like we have all these really interesting kind of wider whiskey projects that we're working on that are kind of shaken up and breaking out of kind of the traditional Irish whiskey tropes, all of which are great for marketing purposes, but are mostly just really interesting whiskey things to do, you know, and are really rooted in who we are as blenders. So it's great fun running a whiskey company at the best of times. And you know, I love the future. Like I can kind of forge our own path and not follow any rules. So I'm just really looking forward to the next 5 years.
Awesome. Sounds very exciting. Tom, question to you as well.
I missed the question. Was it about ambitions and future and?
Yeah, just what you're excited about for yourself, for your company in the future.
I think, like Nicky said, it's just it's an exciting space. I think it's somewhat I think this industry is pandemic proof. Less so the hospitality side, of course, or recession proof even. It's an area that will continue to be sociable. For me, I'm excited. In the immediate future, I'm excited about growing our team. We're hiring. I've just offered a job today to someone. Dan, my business partner, is currently on an interview with someone in the US for the US side of things, and I'm excited to be like, right, let's go, let's grow more people and deliver more great work. So I'm excited about that. And then expanding our services. So in the future, we'll start to expand and grow out of there and start delivering on new work, really. The longer term side of things, eventually we've got ideas around, as an agency, can we launch our own brands? So can we use both our learnings and earnings as a business to launch our own brands with what we've learned and earned? And that's further in the future in part of our business plan, and quite an exciting prospect. You know, I've always been agency side. I've always been, you know, on this side of the fence, so to speak. And I like the idea that, you know, one day I might become a brand owner as well, and be able to implement these special skills in social media, etc., and make it happen for ourselves. Whether that brand is a drinks brand or a piece of tech or a piece of software, whatever, I don't know yet, but we'll come to that. And that's what excites me in the longer term future.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you for your insights. We've had lots of comments already saying how useful the session's been. I really hope people did find it useful and are inspired. Thank you so much for your time. And just before we go, a shout out actually to Julia, who you may have heard at the beginning of this session. You hear her voice at the beginning and end of the sessions, but has put together this career series that we're on the final for now, the final one of these career series events. We've covered hospitality, import distribution, we've covered production, we've covered all sorts of different areas of the industry, and Julia's put that program together for us. They're all on the YouTube channel for WSET. They're also on WSET School London's website if you'd like to go back and rewatch any of them. If you're still deciding which sector of our industry you're interested in, please do go and rewatch. Please check out our job site at jobs.wsetglobal.com. There are some really cool marketing roles on there at the moment, lots of other job sites as well. Have a look around, and yeah, that's it from me. Thank you so much. We've run a little bit over, so thanks for bearing with us. Thanks.
Cheers.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Lucy.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, it's been an amazing evening. Thank you so much for all of your wisdom. Yeah. We will have to end it here, but yeah, I think everyone's had a really good time. So thank you again.
Thanks, everybody.
See you next time.